Well, let's see now. And here we are at the Victorian era, which is, of
Yeah.
course, an era in which reading really becomes very popular.
And in the Victorian era, we started breaking it up by genre at that point because there was just so much literature to work with.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, this is the beginnings of so much of what we read today. It is interesting to look through these and compare them to how they are written compared to books written today.
Mm-hmm.
Chapters were longer, words were longer. Right now, most of our books are like a sitcom level. They're very quick, they're very easy reads. The older literature is a little bit of a harder read, but it is worth the time. Particularly Alexandre Dumas, who wrote Three Musketeers, which everybody's familiar with.
Yeah.
Was, I mean, the writing level and just the pictures he paints with words are amazing.
And I think that is an example of something that should be studied by anybody who is interested in writing, because writers, obviously, to be successful, they need to be able to paint pictures in words.
Correct.
And we need to keep in mind that the reason that this was the case with these books was that this was not only a source for information but also entertainment. You didn't have all the stuff that we have now, and so a lot of these books were meant as entertainment. People had time to sit and read and concentrate. They didn't have the distractions that we have now, and so it was very much more in depth.
Yep.
Yeah, but now the Three Musketeers is every bit as much of a good adventure story as we are going to find now, perhaps better than most.
Yes. I mean, his writing is amazing, and I mean, it stands the test of time. And one of the things, like the movies and stuff that have been done on it, the dialogue is pretty much the same as in the books. So, I mean, that dialogue has held up for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see now. Actually, of course, this whole area, we're now at the point where not only students of literature would be interested, but also students of writing, any kind of writing. Okay.
Yes.
And
this is where, this is to me when reading got fun.
yeah, yes.
And then we're actually going to hit my favorite section of all right about now, which is Gothic.
Gothic. Mm-hmm. Now that's a category. And well, let's see, you want to mention your favorite articles, your favorite books in these Gothic categories?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan. That is going to be the next excursion that we have open, hopefully within the next month. We had planned to have it open earlier, but we decided we really want to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to be, basically, it is going to be an escape room based on his work.
Ah, yeah.
And some of the interesting things in here are the Penny Dreadfuls, which is where I'm standing right now. Basically, they sold for a penny, and they were just small, almost like we would have comic books today.
Uh-huh.
And it was actually the precursor to the comic books.
I'm actually looking at Sweeney Todd right now. I believe that would be.
Yes, it would. And that was the inspiration for the Broadway musical. And again, this is the beginnings of the horror genre. Then this is the month for it. So if you love horror movies, come look in this section, because this is where it all started. Varney the Vampire is part of, at this point you had Polidori wrote Lair of the White Worm, which was what inspired Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And actually, that's another one of our excursion plans, is there was a night that 4 authors came together and dared each other to write horror stories. Out of that, we had the beginnings of the vampire fiction, and we had Frankenstein. Mary Shelley, her husband Percy Shelley, was one of the Romantic poets who was over in the section we were just in. Lord Byron and his doctor, Polidori. Lord Byron is also in the Romantic section. And the 4 of them were vacationing together in a villa on Lake Geneva. And it was after there had been like major weather issues. So it was like dark and stormy the whole time they were there. So they basically sat and wrote.
It was a dark and stormy night.
Exactly. And like I said, that it gave birth to Dracula and Frankenstein.
Both of which are still very popular subjects in modern, movies now, and television stories.
I mean, basically, if you look at almost any horror that comes out now, it started on these shelves we're looking at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So if anybody is going to write horror stories, or any kind of adventure stories, probably, they probably should be looking. They should look here to get an idea of the background, which is not just background. It's written extensively, written in short stories, current movie scripts.
Oh, yeah.
A great example is the H.G. Wells that I'm looking at, which is War of the Worlds, that's been made into a movie at least twice.
Right,
So,
that's getting us into science fiction. And yeah, H.G. Wells, him and Jules Verne were the creators of our modern science fiction.
Yes.
And also, just one little throwback to Edgar Allan Poe, he actually was the first mystery writer as well.
Yes.
And his character, his detective, was the basis of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. And we have actually I'm recalling. I probably learned to read partly from several of those people, but Edgar Allan Poe in particular, because I've read everything he wrote. So let's move then to the science fiction. Oh, and you've got realism, which is for contrast, I should say.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just, there were 2 different things going on at the same time period. Yeah, science fiction, again, is another one of my favorites. And
yeah, mine too.
And technically, Sherlock Holmes is considered to be science fiction.
Well, of course, he does have.
Because it's science.
Yes, that's true. I'm thinking of The Lion's Mane, for example, which is not completely fiction, but it is certainly science related.
Yeah, and for the record, our genre categories may not completely match everybody's. We researched and then kind of went with our heart. Because some of these authors fit in multiple categories.
Oh, of course.
That's the other thing, is there's so much interaction between the authors in this time period, between how they influenced each other, they talked to each other. We were getting to a point in history where there was much more communication around the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of it was through the literature. Yeah, and the same thing, like Tarzan of the Apes.
Mm-hmm.
That was science fiction. He had several other works too. And then we have Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah, well,
Which,
actually,
if you remember, over in the Enlightenment, we had Robinson Crusoe, which was really the first of the adventure series. And then Gulliver's Travels takes us further into that.
mm-hmm. Well, and actually, Burroughs also wrote of somebody who got to Mars. In his
Right,
Astro
John
book.
Carter,
Yeah.
which I think is, I thought we had it here.
I don't. Well, I didn't see it, but I see Tarzan and the Apes. But of course, one can find it. The convenient thing about this is that we are also on the web, so it would take us just a couple of clicks to find practically anything we want to find if we know the name of it.